and even being expressive. So being able to be that natural salesperson, but also storytelling. So as a data scientist, you've got the outputs from the analytical work, but you need to be able to communicate that and motivate others to make certain decisions. So that's how your career often progresses from becoming somebody's analytical straight to a thriver.
Data science and data analytics is the career up for discussion on today's podcast. Our guest focuses his work on enhancing big data and data science capability. He co-authored a paper published by the British Computer Society titled "What is Your Data Worth?" And the piece examines the importance of data and its endless possibilities, especially in today's context where it is widely believed that data is the new oil. He has worked across various industries and in different companies, some of them being Capgemini and PricewaterhouseCoopers, popularly known as PwC. He currently works for a virtual payment bank named Mox in Hong Kong. It is my pleasure to introduce Darren Hariharasegaran to today's podcast and discuss with him the journey of his job. You are listening to The Career Show, a podcast that helps you find the right career and inspires you to follow your passion. My name is Trishan Kansrajani, and I'm a student seeking answers to career-based questions that we all have. I'm here to sit down with career specialists and talk to them about the lessons learned during the journey of their career.
Hi Trishank, how you doing?
Pretty well. How about yourself?
Very good, thank you. Very good.
So let's start off by talking about this myth around business majors not being able to join the data science and data analytics world. I think the myth is that business majors usually don't have any programming language, which makes them not join this industry. So what are your thoughts on this? Do you believe this myth can be broken? And you can talk about your own background as well.
Yeah, so let's talk about my own background. So I was pretty lucky. I came from a mathematics and finance degree where I studied at the University of Leeds. We had done a lot of work related to financial modeling, a lot of quantitative analytics, and also a lot of statistical analysis as well. So the information that I learned from university, such as programming using R, for example, I was able to apply in the real world jobs that I had. So in terms of the first job working for a media agency, I was able to apply that knowledge and really talk about my experiences and problems that I had to solve based on my time at university. But in terms of the myth that a person needs to come from either an engineering background, a mathematics background, or even a psychology background is probably incorrect. I think one of the first hurdles that a lot of applicants have to face is that if you're joining a large organization such as Capgemini Consulting or PwC, there are probably about 1,000 to 10,000 individuals trying to apply for the same job. So you're trying to beat the rest and be seen by the first hurdle, which is our recruitment team. So often there's a separate team that will sift through all of the applications and CVs and assess whether there's certain items that hit the profile required to join a company like a Capgemini or even a PwC. So that's one thing to consider. And then the second thing to consider is once you've actually gone through and gone past the 10,000 individuals down to say 30, you now need to be able to talk about your experience as well. There's lots of different ways of doing that. The first one is coming from a university and being able to explain your experiences from there. The second one is often there are individuals who had another job prior to joining the job they'd like to join. And the third one is potentially doing some outside activities. So there's multiple ways of getting into the industry. During my time, machine learning was really in its infancy. So when I kicked off my career, there were not a lot of platforms to really understand analytics, only through university. But you've got platforms such as Kaggle, which is a popular data science competition And it's a great way for learning these tools for beginners. So each competition is self-contained. You don't need to know the scope of your own project or obtain the data. The data is provided for you. So all you have to do is pick a programming language. Often it's Python or R. Learn the basics of exploring that data, and then train your first machine learning model. So once you've gone past the first hurdle of going through the recruitment cycle and then having the interview, you've got a way of actually talking about some of those problems that you face from Kaggle, which is something that I used to see and look for when I was interviewing graduates. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is you can actually go into online training such as Udemy. They're not very expensive, usually the price of a coffee. And again, you're able to learn from those resources. And of course, YouTube. YouTube is a great way. Everyone usually has a laptop, so just start coding and talking about those problems.
I want to talk to you about machine learning. How important is it for a recent graduate to have machine learning experience from before? For example, when you are interviewing a graduate, do you expect him to have done some kind of projects by himself, if not at a proper internship?
Well, machine learning for me is not always what I'm looking for as a recruiter. There are really two types: somebody who's able to do some computer science, and the second one is maybe doing some statistics and not necessarily doing machine learning. I want to make sure that the person that I'm recruiting is very enthusiastic about the topic around data science, being able to problem solve analytical problems. And they don't necessarily need to do a machine learning module. I think nowadays there's a lot of individuals who will go on GitHub and download a model and say, great, I'm an expert in machine learning. But in reality, what I'm looking for is a conversation to say, here is a problem, how would you tackle that problem? And then being able to talk about some of the techniques where it could work well, where it may not work well. And as a graduate, I'm not looking for an expert, but I'm looking for somebody who's very, very enthusiastic. Somebody who's got a good foundation in their knowledge around the world of statistics, computer science, and even data science. But then someone that I can help build to become a very good data science in the future.
I think being enthusiastic is so important, right? Because it's a necessity for every job. But if I could talk about the enthusiastic friends of mine who want to pursue data science and data analytics, one question that usually comes up in the conversation is the difference between the two. Do you think there are different skill sets required for the two jobs that I just mentioned, that is data science and data analytics? Or is it becoming a similar thing as we move ahead?
Yeah, I think data science is a subset of data and analytics. When we think about data analytics, we're thinking about ingesting data, being able to manipulate that data, and then be able to visualize that data. Data science really only covers one side of that item, because there's things like data engineers. You've got to think about data governance. So data science is just one component of data analytics. When you actually delve in the world of data, it gets very, very complex, especially when you bring in such as cloud, big data. You look at the infrastructures involved, but also the governance, the standards, the policies that need to be put in place, and even the risks and controls. So if data is duplicated, this could affect the overall output of a result. So for me, data science is one aspect of a bigger world of data analytics.
Super cool. Super cool. That is super interesting. But if I could talk about your journey now, I think you're one of the first guests on the show that has explored the same career in 4 different industries. So I know you've been part of the media industry, you've been part of the consulting industry, you've been part of the risk assurance industry, and currently you're working with a fintech. So do you want to talk about how it's been different for you while working at these 4 different industries out there? Because I think that is super interesting to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So after university, the first job that I had gone into is joining a media agency. And it was a pretty exciting time. For me, I wanted to use my knowledge of analytics, mathematics, statistics, and be able to apply it to real world problems. And joining a media agency, it was it was a great opportunity to go into the digital media space, conduct bespoke advanced analytics, audience targeting, looking at pricing, promotion activities, but also looking at, say, sales performance and market positions across different platforms. When I had my interview, I remember the interview was with a guy called Richard Thomas, and we had a great connection. We were both very enthusiastic with data analytics, and we really got on. And I remember that first time when I had that conversation, and it was with the research director, Amanda, who was also great. I kind of knew that was the job I wanted to get into, because these are the people that I wanted to work for. And during my time at working for AMS Media, we were doing some really interesting problems and solving really interesting problems. So the first one was with the large cruise liner, where they wanted to look at onboard spend. So again, if you think about media agencies, we've only got a set amount of money to spend, but to be able to attract as many customers as possible. The problem in this case was all about onboard spend, where somebody has decided to pay X amount of money to be on the cruise liner, but how do you make sure that they spend a lot more money so you're generating more revenue? And what we found out is 20% of the customers were spending 80% of the revenue there. Mm-hmm. So how do we target that? And we're able to improve their return on investments. And then even doing events, which is trying to get as number of people to buy tickets before the particular event. We do A/B split testing, which is where we get two different types of emails, change where the pictures are located, and try to assess the performance of those two emails. And often you see a 1% increase over the other, which could mean a £10,000 increase in sales versus one over the other. So some real interesting problems to face. But during my time there, the manager that I was working for, we really hone in on the analytics, the statistics, the mathematics. And this is where he started to really understand about the different techniques to use. So, often people just say cluster analysis, but there's hierarchical, there's fuzzy, there's complete cluster analysis, etc. So my time at AMS Media was delving into the world of the customer. How do we attract that customer, retain that customer, but also get the most out of them using mathematics as the core point, which was really interesting for me.
The super interesting part you bring up is the different placement of images in your email, because I think that's something I faced recently as well while I was marketing my podcast. While I was just entering my link, the post wasn't doing that well. But as soon as I started attaching images to that post, the likes started going insane. So I think that is super interesting to note. But let's talk about your journey moving to Capgemini. How did that take place? Why did you make that decision? And how was the work different at Capgemini?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I really loved working at AMS Media. We had some real interesting problems to solve. In terms of the analytics space, we were really becoming subject matter experts in how to use certain mathematical models, be able to come up with some real interesting insights. But I think there was a part of me, and this is about 10 years ago, that wanted to delve into the world of big data and cloud, but also wanted to spend more time learning from others. Richard was probably the best manager I've had ever since, but it was only one person. As a young junior analyst who wanted to learn more, I've got a long career, so I wanted to learn from others from different industries. And an organization such as Capgemini, which represents consulting industries across financial services, consumer products and retail, automotive, etc. It was a great opportunity to apply my knowledge, not only in the customer space, but also in different industries. And that's one of the reasons why I decided to go into Capgemini Consulting. And I originally joined something called the CDC, the Consulting Development Community, which is known as Capgemini's graduate program. It was a move away from pure analytics to being able to communicate, manage, and coordinate as well. So that's one of the reasons why I wanted to join Capgemini Consulting.
But before I move on to your journey with PwC and the risk assurance aspect of it, I remember you telling me that 6 weeks into Capgemini, there was a moment where you wanted to quit, but resilience played an important factor for you and helped you get through that time. Do you want to talk about why that resilience period was so important?
Yeah, I mean, in the world of consulting, you have to be very, very resilient. I think I've been lucky during my time at Capgemini. I worked on about 15 different engagements, very, very different, from strategy all the way to roadmap and operating model, architecture, to actually the detailed analytics itself. But this particular program, it was working with a large financial services organization where we were looking at their overall strategy and operating models. So not really related to analytics, but I remember the reason why I was asked to join is because of my data background. They wanted to incorporate data into the strategy work that we're doing. I remember that the principal who was managing this, which is, his name is Anuj, who is a remarkable guy, very, very clever, very, very on it. But he was managing this whole transformation program. But he had seen something where he thought, well, this is a unique selling point to use data to drive overall strategy. During my time in that particular period, it was a 6-week piece of work where we had to delve in and understand what the strategy should be for this multi-million-pound organization. And at the time, I only wanted to join Capgemini to do analytics work. So that was the first thing that was a bit of an issue. The second thing is I didn't really understand what an operating model was. Building a blueprint, and the manager that I was working for probably didn't have that much experience around operating models. So I'd be asking a lot of questions, but that particular individual didn't really know a lot, whereas the principal, of course, Anuj had that information. So we'd be trying to have these interviews, be working pretty much 12 hours a day to come up with the overall strategy. But working 12 to 14 hours when you've come from a media agency is very, very different environment. And looking back now, it was probably the worst experience, i.e. hence wanting to quit. I remember there was one time where you have to travel to your client space. I was in the hotel room thinking, should I quit or not? But it was also the best time because, again, if you could face that particular environment, you can face anything. And I use that as a basis for any work that I'm doing now. So really interesting moment of my life, but a great opportunity to learn. So any adverse condition, there's always an opportunity to learn.
I think that is super important to note that at one point or another, everyone goes through this phase. I think not only at work, people face this even at school and university, whether they're considering if they're studying the right thing. But I think resilience is super important in life.
Yeah, you'll use it. You know, I've been lucky enough to work on a number of different projects, and you have to be versatile if you're in the consulting industry and environment. You know, I've been able to work with large consumer products and retail organizations, central government. We're talking big scale transformation programs, but also small teams doing analytical work, but maybe small teams as well to do strategy work. And actually all of that experience has given me the life lessons, the knowledge that I'm using nowadays to do my own work.
Let's talk about risk assurance at PwC, that is PricewaterhouseCoopers. Was your work different from the consulting industry? And the reason I ask that is because when you enter the consulting industry, data analytics get mixed with consulting and the modeling aspect of it. But was your time at PwC only data related and data driven?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough at Capgemini to be part of kind of two real big transformation programs that were pretty iconic. One for a large CPR organization where we had to implement a global data ecosystem. So they had information across the world and we were connecting that information together to provide some new reporting analytics platforms. The other program was this real big, large open source analytics program, which is probably one of the largest in Western Europe. where we were building a big data lake, being able to mitigate fraud through the use of big data analytics. And it was really fascinating learning from a number of different subject matter experts in different industries. And this is where you learn a lot of the principles and how to manage teams and how to deliver analytics properly. But there was always something in the back of my mind, which is if I was able to not only deliver, but be able to review and see what other organizations are doing, that will make me more of a complete person in the world of big data analytics. And this is where PwC came into play, because what they do, as you mentioned, is that they've got a risk assurance team, which allows you to first deliver big scale transformation programs, but also assure other organizations. And so this is why joining PwC was an interesting proposition. It was also a time in my life where I was given the opportunity to build a team within PwC, a data analytics team within PwC. In fact, the partner that I knew in PwC actually came from Capgemini technology arm, and we were part of these two big programs. So it was one of the reasons why I wanted to join that particular assurance team. And we conducted some real interesting work, working again with some other iconic companies. But we were able to, first of all, build out that team, but also see and understand the rules and regulations, compliance, the controls and risk. And that's where I started to learn things such as 3 lines of defense. So, I mean, those who don't know, 3 lines of defense is so the first line of defense is all about how the function that owns and manages risk. So it's pretty much the work that I used to do all the time, build big data lakes, big analytical systems. But then you'd have the second and third line, which is something I didn't really know during my time at Capgemini. And the second line is ultimately functions that oversees or who specialize in compliance and managing of risks, because there's multiple types of risks that you can face, which is reputational risk, there's a brand risk, etc. And then the third line is pretty much internal audit. So this is functions that provide independent assurance, and that's where PwC comes into play. So they'll bring a number of subject matter experts into, say, an existing large-scale program, and then be able to understand whether the program is working well and how could it be improved. So they sit outside the risk management process, but they also advise on how things that could be improved. And they also had a number of different domains and real big expertise, deep expertise in these different domains. So that's where it got really, really fascinating for me at PwC.
So you mentioned that you had the opportunity of building a team at PwC. And that brings me to my next question. And that is, how does the role of a data analyst change as they go up the rank?
Yeah, that is a really interesting question. If you looked at, say, my own career, I really focused on building my analytical expertise when I was at AMS Media Group, which is to really understand the mathematics and be able to understand which algorithms to use during which time, but also how to manipulate data. When I then moved over to Capgemini Consulting, they equipped me with the ability to collaborate. So being able to not only understand analytics, but then be able to communicate with the wider group, obtain information requirements from others, being able to work with others, and manage my time appropriately. One of the key things, especially when it comes to junior talent, is sometimes it's very difficult for them to finish a particular project. So working in that consulting environment, we often time boxed and scoped the work out and made sure we deliver during those particular time periods. And as you move from Capgemini to PwC, this is where it becomes more of a leadership program, where, again, going back to my time at Capgemini managing streams, you've got a very big complex problem, maybe building a platform, but be able to break it up into smaller chunks that you can feed into your different teams. And I remember doing a management training for our graduates, and it's known as the Merrill Reed method. I'm not sure if you're aware of it, but it's really talks about the 4 types of personalities: driver, expressive, amiable, and analytical. So if you're a driver, you're very much object focused. You know what that you want and how to get there. You communicate quickly and get to the point, and sometimes you're a bit tactless. Expressive is you're more of a natural salesperson or storyteller. You're able to motivate and communicate with others, and you often leave out some facts and details. But you're a talker than a doer, really. Amiable is when you're very much expressive, and then of course analytical is where you're more of a highly detailed oriented person, and often it can be difficult to make decisions without all of the facts. And I remember conducting this training, and a lot of the graduates were actually moving towards the analytical, amiable side. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight during that training session is, as you move and build your experiences, you tend to cover all of the different areas. So you'd kick off with somebody who is very detail orientated, being able to obtain all the facts. Amiable, which is to build those relationships, be able to collaborate appropriately. But then you become more of a driver, which is to focus on delivering the particular projects. You're object focused. You know how to get there. You've got an idea, and you build a plan around completing that particular project. And even being expressive, so being able to be that natural salesperson, but also storytelling. So as a data scientist, you've got the outputs from the analytical work, but you need to be able to communicate that and motivate others to make certain decisions. So that's how your career often progresses, from becoming somebody who's analytical straight to a driver.
Interesting to hear about those 4 types of personalities, but I want to take you back to the fact that you've worked in 3 different industries. I just find that so fascinating because it tells me the future of data analytics. It tells me that data analytics is such an important part of every industry. So where do you see this data analytics industry going in the future? What is the scope and what are the opportunities within it?
Yeah, I mean, data analytics is important because it helps businesses optimize their processes. It's implemented in business models, which means that companies can reduce costs, identify more efficient ways of working. And so you're trying to identify problems, known and unknown problems, through pattern detection. You're trying to identify trends by assessing time series. You're trying to target customers. In terms of where I think we're going, first of all, it's data monetization. We've recently created a report around monetizing of data. And the reason that came about is because we were working with an organization that was looking to mitigate fraud by exchanging data across a number of different organizations. We were building an API platform at the time. And we then started to realize that this type of conversation was happening in a number of different areas. Recently we were working with the airport and also working with a large retailer, and the retailer wanted to enrich their data by understanding what customers are coming into the country. So you can start to link the 2 together, and that's where data exchange and data monetization comes into play. So instead of treating your data as an overhead, a cost to the business, you're turning it into more of a strategic asset. But there's a number of different areas to think about when you're monetizing your data. It doesn't actually take a couple of months. It will take a couple of years. And the reason why is because you need to make sure that you have a set of data that is worthwhile sharing. You need to be able to create things such as contractual agreements, build an ecosystem that allows you to exchange data from somebody who produced that data to somebody who wants that data and provides that demand. You need to build a platform to exchange the data. So as the data is converted into a product, it needs to be secure and compliant with regulators such as GDPR. And then you need to establish things like service level agreements. So ensure that there's appropriate level of quality and timeliness in a way that doesn't impact downward operations. So for example, if I was supplying data to one of my clients and they're using it for very important purposes, and the data that provided is no longer compliant, with our SLAs, it means it will affect their operations and something will have to come out of it. So I think monetization data, that exchange of data is going to be a key area. And then the final thing is AI. So ethical AI is the conversation that everyone is talking about. Transparency, understanding how the AI model is making that decision. The explainability, understanding reasons behind each decision, and provability. So the mathematics to ensure the certainty behind that decision. So those are kind of the three areas I think we're moving towards in the world of data analytics.
But the fact that data is becoming such a big thing, and the fact that it's going to be monetized in the future, a top debate in this decade has been the issue of data security and privacy. Do you think it's something that the new graduates should be aware of? Should they see this as a challenge and find a solution for it?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a really key topic because when we think of data security privacy, you're really talking about data governance. And when we say data governance, it really means the formal management of data assets within an organization. And it comprises of really four things. Data protection. So is our data safe and secure? Data compliance. Is our data compliant with the regulators? The third is data quality. So can we trust the data that we're using and leveraging? And then the use of data. So how are we leveraging that data? So you need to be able to answer those four questions around data governance. And then of course, there's more specifically the data security side. And learning from my past experience working with one of the central government organizations who had to make sure that the data is secure, is there's four controls. So hardware, software, access, and audit. Hardware controls is how do we prevent people from being able to access that data from a hardware perspective. Software controls is how do we make sure the data is properly tokenized. Access is only certain individuals should have access to certain sets of data. And then audit, being able to log and monitor what is happening with your data. And these are real key pillars when it comes to managing data that I believe that data analytics and even data scientists should be fully aware of, because it can give them the opportunities, but it can often be some limitations on what they can and cannot do. And it's a really, really important part of their day-to-day job.
But I would like to go back and talk to you about artificial intelligence and machine learning again. Even though I'm not pursuing the field of data science, I think the technology that surrounds it is so fascinating that I always like to read up on it. And I think going in the future, data science is going to be such an attractive field for new graduates. So what is one advice that you can give them that they should definitely keep in mind? What is one advice that you wish you had received?
Yeah, in the field of AI, it's a very complex arena. There's a number of different facets to think about, from engineering, science, business domains, etc. So I guess one of the things that I used to do when I was younger is I used to write all of the information that I've learned into one book. And it's a place where you can bring your thoughts together and be able to refer to that information later down the line. You're never going to be able to keep all the information in your brain. The other thing that I think is probably worth, even for me when I was younger, is be able to proactively go to those with a lot more experience. Nowadays, we've got individuals who've got 5, 10, 15 years of data analytics experience, especially around data science, in the world of cloud, in the world of microservices. And they've been having experiences where they've had good experiences, understanding this is really good content, as well as bad experiences, areas to avoid that could potentially waste people's time. So those are the two things I'd probably recommend for graduates who are looking to move into the world of AI.
Well, thank you so much, Darren. I think that's exactly what you did today. You came on the show and shared your experience for these new graduates. So thank you so much for that. I completely agree with you. It's so important to note down your learnings and refer it every now and then, because you need to keep on building on the feedback you receive and the things that you learn in life. On that note, thank you so much, Darren, for coming onto the show today. It's been my pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you for sharing the journey of your job.
Thank you, Trishank. Really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed this week's career discussion. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support means a lot.